It was a foggy night, and Sarah was driving home from a work conference at midnight. She felt uneasy as the thick fog complicated seeing anything beyond a few feet. She never imagined she would be in this situation.
It was just a work conference, and she was supposed to drive back home early in the evening. But as the discussion dragged on,
it became a free-for-all all-business meeting with everyone griping and cursing. She was stuck in the room, unable to leave until it was over.
It was already dark, almost midnight, when she finally got out, and she knew she had to drive home alone. She had always been a confident driver, but this time was different. The roads were dark and empty, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up on her. Whenever she saw a shadow or heard a sound, her heart would skip a beat. She tried calming herself down by turning up the music and focusing on the road, but it was useless. Her mind was racing with all the worst-case scenarios. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove down the deserted road. The thick mist made seeing even a few feet ahead of her car difficult. She had never been so terrified in her life. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel the sweat on her palms. She was alone,
and no one could help her if something went wrong. She tried to stay calm and focus on the road as she drove, but her mind drifted to all the horror stories she had heard about women driving alone at night. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched.
She half expected to see someone following her every time she looked in the rearview mirror.
The fog seemed to thicken by the minute, its tendrils wrapping around Sarah's car and suffocating her with an overwhelming sense of unease.
The road ahead disappeared into a white abyss, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet in front of her. Sarah's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel tightly, her anxiety rising with every passing moment. The rational part of her mind urged her to pull over and wait for the fog to clear, but a nagging fear of vulnerability kept her driving on. As the minutes turned into an eternity, Sarah strained her eyes, desperately trying to pierce through the dense fog. She squinted,
hoping to catch a glimpse of any familiar landmarks that would assure her she was on the right path.
But all she saw was a disorienting blur of shadows and hazy outlines. Each turn and bend in the road seemed to stretch forever, amplifying her yearning to catch sight of the warm glow of her home in the distance.
Exhaustion began to weigh heavily on Sarah's shoulders. She had been awake since dawn, attending a grueling conference that had mentally and physically drained her. The fatigue seeped into her bones, her eyelids growing heavy with an irresistible urge to close. Aware of the danger, she knew she needed to find a safe spot to pull over and rest. However, the fog-shrouded landscape offered no solace.
Panic set in as regret washed over her for not staying in a hotel and avoiding this treacherous late-night drive. Sarah realized the precariousness of her situation, vowing to herself that she would never put herself in such jeopardy again.
Just as her weariness threatened to overcome her, a loud pop echoed through the silence, followed by a jolt that shook her car. Sarah's heart sank as she realized she had a flat tire. She pulled over to the side of the road, frustration and worry etched across her face.
Opening the trunk, she hoped to find a spare tire, but she was disappointed as she discovered it was flat, too.
It felt like the universe had conspired against her, leaving her helpless and alone.
The car pulled over, and a man unlike any she had ever seen peered out of the window. His appearance sent chills down her spine. He seemed out of place in this world. Tall and thin, with long, bony fingers, and a face that appeared ghost-like, he exuded an otherworldly aura.
His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes seemed to penetrate her very soul.
Curiosity mingled with fear as Sarah approached the man's vehicle.
His outdated and antique clothes further heightened the sense that he belonged to a different era.
He moved with deliberate and ghostly grace as if he were floating rather than walking. Despite the eerie nature of his appearance, Sarah felt an inexplicable pull towards him, as if he held some secret knowledge or power. As she drew closer, a faint scent reached her nostrils, a sweet and floral fragrance that hung in the air, captivating her senses with its ethereal quality. Yet a nagging feeling began to take hold of her. It was as though this person, this apparition, was not truly human. Sarah's mind swirled with questions, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. Was he a spirit, a ghost that had somehow traversed into their world? The unsettling and fascinating mix of emotions intensified as she pondered the mystery before her. His presence opened the door to a realm she had never considered, where the boundaries between the living and the ethereal blurred. As the man's lips parted to speak, Sarah's heart quickened, an unexplainable fear gripping her tightly. She fought to shake off the sudden terror that had enveloped her, but it clung to her like a suffocating fog. The anxiety surged through her veins, compelling her to run. Without second-guessing herself, Sarah turned on her heels and sprinted away from the vehicle, the echoes of the man's bone-chilling screech ringing in her ears. "You shouldn't be out here alone. It's not safe." His words reverberated in her mind, further fueling her panic. Sarah didn't slow down until she felt a safe distance between herself and the mysterious man. She leaned against a tree, gasping for breath, her mind racing with fear and confusion. What had just transpired? Who was that man, and why had he caused such terror to grip her soul? The memory of his haunting appearance and his unearthly voice sent shivers down her spine. As she regained her composure, Sarah glanced back toward where the man's car had been parked. To her disbelief, the vehicle had vanished without a trace. It was as if it had never been there at all. Doubt crept into her mind. Had she imagined the entire encounter? Was it a figment of her exhausted imagination playing tricks on her? Feeling foolish but unable to shake off the eerie feeling, Sarah decided to continue her journey on foot. She had no intention of returning to her stranded car. Instead, she sought refuge at the nearest gas station. Sarah walked briskly, her senses on high alert, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig sending her heart racing. The fog, still thick, seemed even more ominous and evil, but she knew that she had to press forward. Walking down the deserted road, she suddenly heard a strange noise. It sounded like a low growl. Sarah stopped in her tracks and looked around but couldn't see anything. She shrugged it off and continued walking. As she continued walking down the lonely road, she saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a woman wearing a long dark coat and a hood that covered her face. Sarah tried to avoid her and stepped aside, but the woman blocked her way. Sarah asked if she needed help, but the woman didn't answer. Instead, she just stared at Sarah with her piercing blue eyes. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. There was something strange about this woman. She tried to move past her, but the woman stood firm. Suddenly the woman spoke. Her voice was low and hoarse, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. The woman said, "You shouldn't be out here alone. It's not safe." Sarah didn't know what to make of it. She thanked the woman and quickly made her way up the road. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She couldn't explain why, but she felt like the woman she had encountered was somehow connected to her. She put it out of her mind and focused on reaching the gas station ahead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she saw the familiar flicker of lights of what appeared to be the gas station. As she moved closer to the light, her eyes were immediately drawn to a single street lamp. It stood tall, casting a warm, welcoming glow that seemed to reach out and beckon her closer. She realized that the street light was none other than her gas station. Against the pitch-black sky, it shone like a beacon of hope, a symbol of safety and security amidst the unknown dangers lurking in the shadows. As she drew closer, she saw that the lamp was old-fashioned, with a slender and elegant pole that rose to a curved, lantern-like top. The metal was weathered and rusted, and the glass panes of the lantern were slightly frosted with age. As she passed beneath the lamp, she could feel its warm glow enveloping her like a comforting blanket on a chilly night. The soft and gentle light cast a delicate halo around the immediate area, leaving the rest of the highway in deep shadows. It was like a tiny oasis of light amid an endless sea of darkness. As she looked past the lamppost, her heart pounded in her chest, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over her. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end as she couldn't believe what she saw before her eyes. She tried to keep her breathing steady, but could feel her body trembling with fear. The darkness seemed to be closing around her, threatening to swallow her whole. She fought the urge to scream in horror, knowing it would only attract whatever lurked in the shadows. How could this be? Was she going mad? Had she been walking around in a circle? And where had the lamppost come from? It was her very own car sitting a few feet beyond the lamppost. This had to be a coincidence. She had to know for sure.
She quickly approached the car, removed the key from her pocket, and stuck it in the door.
The key turned with ease in the lock and very promptly unlocked the door.
As she stood staring at the car door, she felt a sudden wave of shock and surprise wash over her. She was taken aback by what had just happened,
and her body began feeling weak. She knew she needed to sit down somewhere before she collapsed quickly,
so she opened the car door and collapsed in the driver's seat. As Sarah sat in the driver's seat, she took a moment to gather her thoughts. The night's events had taken a toll on her, and she needed a moment to process everything that had transpired. The familiarity of her car provided a slight sense of comfort amidst the chaos. She leaned back, her body sinking into the familiar cushioned seat, and closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing heart.
As she sat in the car's silence, Sarah's mind replayed the encounter with the mysterious woman and the strange occurrences along the road. The growling noise, the woman's warning, and the sudden appearance of her car near the lamppost seemed like a dream, yet
the lingering unease reminded her that this was all too real. She opened her eyes and looked out the window, expecting to see the woman in the dark coat or some other manifestation of the eerie events. But the road appeared empty, devoid of any signs of supernatural occurrences. The lamppost stood tall, casting its warm glow, but the shadows seemed less menacing now.
Sitting in her car, she closed her eyes and tried to focus on breathing. She took slow, deep breaths and tried to clear her mind. After a few minutes, she felt a little more grounded and less overwhelmed by the shock and surprise. Eventually, she gathered her thoughts and decided on her next action.
She made sense of the situation by convincing herself that in her hurry she had missed seeing the lamppost, and because of the thick fog, she had lost her sense of direction and somehow walked in a circle. She resolved to head back toward the gas stations and remain keener and alert as she knew she felt overwhelmingly exhausted. After walking less than half a mile, she suddenly stood frozen, staring ahead with her mouth wide open.
Her eyes were transfixed on something in the distance that left her unable to move or speak. She tried to take a step forward, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. The world around her faded as she struggled to process what she saw. As she stood there, her mind raced with questions. What was happening? Was she dreaming? Was this some prank? With her mouth still open, she felt her heart pounding as she desperately tried to make sense of it all. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, threatening to spill over and ruin her makeup. She couldn't let that happen. Not here, not now. So, instead, she began to laugh. It started as a slight chuckle, but soon became a full-blown, hysterical laugh. She didn't care how crazy she looked. She just needed to keep laughing. As she continued to laugh, she felt the world's weight lift off her shoulders. She forgot about everything weighing her down for just a moment. All the stress, the worry, the fear, it all faded away. All she could feel was the pure joy of laughter. Suddenly, the tears returned with a vengeance, and Sarah couldn't hold them back any longer. She buried her face in her hands, trying to muffle the sobs that racked her body. Sarah felt so alone, so helpless. There was nothing she could do to fix the situation. Eventually, the tears stopped, and she was able to compose herself. She vigorously rubbed her eyes and opened them widely to get a better look. When she looked again, she saw an old, weather-beaten bench, the lamp-post, and her car sitting several feet ahead. Sarah's mind raced with confusion and frustration. How could she have ended up back in the same spot? It felt like a cruel joke, a never-ending loop of despair. She couldn't comprehend how she had walked in circles, seemingly trapped in an unending cycle. Doubt filled her mind as she wondered if she was losing her sanity. Once a symbol of hope and safety, the lamp-post now taunted her with its presence. With a heavy heart, Sarah approached her car once again. The familiar sight should have brought relief, but instead it brought a sense of defeat. She opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat, feeling defeated and exhausted. The weight of the night's events pressed upon her, and she wondered if she would ever escape this relentless nightmare. As she sat in the car, Sarah's mind began to race with possibilities. Was there something supernatural at play, or was it all a figment of her imagination? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something larger at work, something beyond her understanding.
The unknown dangers lurking in the shadows seemed to mock her, reminding her of her vulnerability and powerlessness. Sarah took a deep breath, determined to regain control of the situation. She couldn't let fear and confusion dictate her actions. With a newfound strength, Sarah returned to the same spot where she found the woman standing in the middle of the road as she could help. When she arrived, she saw a piece of paper lying on the ground. She picked it up and saw that it was a drawing of a woman. It was the same woman she had met tonight. Sarah was shocked. She didn't know what to make of it. She decided to take the paper with her, so she folded it up and shoved it inside her purse. Sarah still couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was somehow connected to her. Sarah decided to head back to the car again, but as she walked, she saw the same woman. She was sauntering as if lost in thought. The woman looked up, and her eyes seemed to pierce through Sarah. The woman just stared at Sarah, her expression blank. It was as if she was in a trance. Sarah felt under her spell as the woman muttered something in a language she couldn't understand. For some reason, she couldn't keep her eyes off her. The woman had an air of mystery about her that was intriguing. She felt drawn to her even though she didn't know the woman. Sarah wanted to know more about her, to understand her. Who was she? Where did the woman come from? What was she doing on the deserted road at that time of night? Sarah suddenly caught a whiff of the most delicious scent. It was sweet, almost like vanilla mixed with cinnamon, and it seemed to emanate from the woman. She couldn't help but inhale deeply, trying to take in as much of the aroma as possible. The smell was so enticing that she wanted to follow her, trying to get closer to her so that she could breathe in more of the scent. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, and she was utterly mesmerized by the sweet, intoxicating scent. She wondered what it could be, a cologne or perfume perhaps, or it was just her natural scent. After an interminable period, the woman finally broke the silence and addressed Sarah lucidly. Uttering the words, "The fog brings eternal tranquility," she beckoned Sarah to respond. But in an instant the woman vanished into thin air, leaving Sarah stunned and at a loss for words. A sense of impending madness overcame her as she questioned the authenticity of the woman's existence, pondering whether she had been real or merely a product of her own imagination. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped into the swirling fog, hoping to find her way to the nearby gas station. The darkness enveloped her, obscuring her vision and disorienting her senses. She clung to the hope that the gas station would be her salvation, her escape from this never-ending nightmare. With each step, the fog thickened, swallowing any trace of the outside world. Panic seeped into Sarah's veins as she realized that she was lost. She retraced her steps, desperately trying to find her way back to her stalled car, but the fog played wicked tricks on her mind, leading her in circles and mocking her futile attempts to escape. Time became an elusive concept as Sarah wandered aimlessly through the fog. Her cries for help echoed into the void, only to be swallowed by the eerie silence. The fog seemed alive, an evil force that toyed with her, pushing her further into despair. Now and then Sarah caught glimpses of the gas station's neon lights flickering in the distance, an illusion of hope in the abyss. Fueled by desperation, she would sprint towards it, only to be cruelly deceived as the lights faded away, leaving her stranded in the suffocating fog once more. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Sarah's appearance changed. Her once vibrant spirit faded, replaced by a hollow, haunted gaze. Her body weakened from exhaustion and lack of sustenance, but her determination to escape remained unyielding. She clung to the hope that she would break free from this nightmarish cycle. As the fog whispered its chilling secrets, Sarah's mind unraveled. She questioned her sanity, unsure if the gas station ever truly existed or if it was a figment of her imagination. Her thoughts became a jumbled mess, blending reality with hallucinations, blurring the lines between what was once concrete and what was now a twisted nightmare. In the depths of her despair, Sarah's spirit diminished, her will to resist fading. She accepted her fate, knowing she was forever condemned to wander the fog, searching for a gas station that would forever elude her grasp. The fog became her eternal prison, a purgatory of her own making. And so Sarah continues to wander, trapped in an endless loop of confusion and despair. Her pleas for help go unanswered, her cries swallowed by the fog's insatiable hunger.
The gas station remains an elusive mirage, a cruel reminder of her eternal torment.